Chapter 3, The Main Lines. Oh, I'm back here again.
Your progress is adequate, though I'm seeing some lingering signs of psi fatigue. The new training is stimulating your phoric system more than I would like. You aren't learning any psi techniques, are you?
Odette said she was keeping you updated on the exact nature of our sessions. All I've been doing is learning some meditation and mental focus strategies. Dr. Sasky let out a soft, annoyed sigh and tapped into the handheld display he always carried around.
That shouldn't be enough to register this much on your scans. However, it aligns with the profile of someone who possesses an overactive phoric system.
Weird.
With the level of synaptic activity I'm seeing in the lateral lamvatry nuclei clusters, I imagine the techniques you're learning have made you more receptive to the psi waves around you, even when they're being suppressed. The adaptability of your psi continues to astound.
He looked at me over the top of the display, eyebrow raised.
And how do you feel about your new schedule?
I don't mind it. I spend most of my spare time reading, but it's nice to get out of my flat for a while. I don't want to push myself or start training too early, but I dislike sitting around feeling like I'm not doing anything. And I suppose there's a part of me that dislikes having this ability I can't control, especially if it can lead to me actually harming myself. Frustrating as it is, even this amount of training makes me feel a little more in control of my situation. He was observing me carefully as I spoke, undoubtedly looking for signs of stress, anxiety, or avoidance, but he seemed satisfied.
An understandable response. I have observed that you become more anxious when you have nothing to occupy your thoughts. Though I'm not pleased to see the regression in your progress, it remains at an acceptable level. And I'm not pleased the Council found a way to circumvent my recommendations by not having you focus on Psi, but it appears to be helping your overall mood. So I'll allow the training to continue for the time being. How are you coping with the physical training?
There's not much to say about that. It's mostly stamina building. It's tedious. I don't mind working out. I used to go jogging with my brother every day. It's not fun to jog around a small training room because your trainer doesn't want to take you anywhere else so as to keep interactions with other human beings to a minimum.
You get bored with things quickly, I've noted. An adventurous spirit is to be expected given your area of study. Training outdoors shouldn't be a problem if it's early enough. Rather than using a training arena, you might benefit from a set track around the grounds themselves. I'll discuss it with Odette so she can consider alterations to your schedule.
More early mornings? I suppose I shouldn't complain too much considering I woke early anyway.
Odette has also indicated you are managing the food plan well enough.
Ugh.
A healthy diet is one of the key components to physical health. You were deficient in many vitamins and minerals when you arrived. No doubt the result of deplorable eating habits common with university students.
I feel seen. Just because I'm like... I had a conversation with a doctor a few months ago, and he was like, you really should increase, like, greens. Have you considered green vegetables? And I'm like, they taste yucky, though. So I felt that, from Morgan.
I imagine your sleep hygiene was as terrible.
Have you ever known a student with good sleep hygiene?
Certainly not in New Albion's ambitious education system. It is important to safeguard your health in this line of work. Therefore, we need to correct your bad habits.
Trust me, I was there the first 4 times you lectured me about this.
Given your complaints, a 5th lecture may be in order.
Please don't. I couldn't handle another one. The last few days had been exhausting as it was. Though it didn't yet involve psi training, it was still a change from my days of doing nothing in the infirmary. I was getting an idea of just how physically taxing this job would be. Agents tried to stay in top form since there were situations Psi couldn't be used. Or, in everyone else's case, where Psi might even be suppressed. For the time being, that didn't seem to be a concern for me. But Dr. Sasaki had already indicated they were studying my psi waves to figure out why inhibitors didn't work on me so they could correct it. For medical reasons, of course. Yes. Well, and in case we ever encountered anyone else with this peculiarity. It was uncomfortable, but I could see the necessity in figuring it out.
Odette is proving an adequate trainer.
Yes, she's been fine so far. Mara has also helped a little as well. Normally, I'd been told, my guard would have been assigned to handle my training, but they were busy with some case I knew nothing about. Interesting. Very interesting. I thought for sure Vaughn would be in charge of our training this time, but looks like that's not the case. I wasn't getting access to mission briefings or anything yet, so I only knew it was something to do with a relic-related mishap. And that I knew because I'd had dinner with Vaughn and Mara twice.
Finally, are there any recent developments with your psi perception?
No, nothing new since our last visit. I am keeping a more detailed observation journal now. The psi inhibitors do somewhat limit my ability to see someone's psi energy, but as far as I can tell, there is at least some relationship between the brightness, the density, and complexity. Color seems to be based on someone's rank, but people within the same rank don't have the exact same color. Interesting, so she's already at the color stage.
Interesting. Such a clear visual perception of psi is not something I've heard of before. I'm curious if the visual cortex is activated when perceiving psi energy.
I already told you, I don't see it with my eyes.
Perhaps not. However, when our brain engages in creating mental imagery, even when sensory input is not available, parts of the visual thalamic nuclei and visual cortex are engaged. It may require testing.
A series of tests just sounds like so much fun.
It's no secret that your unique status has generated a higher than normal level of interest in your abilities. Especially when those abilities stand so far outside the norm of what we expect from Espers. As an abnormal N-class, I understand all too well the frustration that can come with such a status.
Okay, so you're N-class, you're not a fairy. Interesting. What is your rank? Girl, what color are you seeing on our doctor here? I'm trying to think, like, what would he be a... Nah, probably not a rook. Probably not a bishop, but would a knight be... in the medical field? I mean, being a knight could actually be useful because you could, like, teleport instantly in when there's an emergency. I feel like he's gotta be either a knight or a king. It'd be wild if he was also a king. Secret king? Hiding himself? I don't know. Maybe knight. I'm gonna go with knight for now until I learn more about this boy. Abnormal?
It means my skill set is outside the norm for an N-class rook, yet I do not meet the biological requirements to be classed as a so-called fairy Esper. Nothing more.
So you're a rook. Interesting. I guess if you were a higher class, you'd probably be out in the field more so than in headquarters. A rook. Well, I was wrong. So he's an abnormal N-class rook, but not in the fairy category. What does that mean? Huh. I hadn't known that about him. The previous queen wasn't able to see Psi the way I can?
I have been delving into her records more diligently since your arrival. There is limited information regarding her ability to perceive the Psi of other people. It does not appear her ability was similar to yours.
Limited information? She was a member of Endgame for a while, though, wasn't she?
Her approach to Psi was unconventional, and frequently met with resistance as she pushed against old ideals. She was not altogether forthcoming about her abilities as a result.
I'd like to read more about her too, one day, when I get my system access restored. It might be helpful. Unfortunately, the most useful bit of reading you could do is in the hands of Jack, so we're not getting that this time, probably. And maybe a bit uncomfortable. I knew... Excuse me, hold on a second. That saliva gets stuck. Okay, should be good. I knew little about her other than she died in the line of duty. Hello, throat? We're fine, right? Come on. Don't you do this to me.
Sylvia Visser was adept at theokinetics. Unless you demonstrate a similar aptitude, I am uncertain how beneficial her records will be to you.
It can't hurt to look.
Perhaps.
Any other questions for me, or am I free to go?
Just one, to sate my own curiosity. You said individual Espers possess similar colors based on their rank. May I have an example?
Oh, sure. Well, Vaughn and Odette are both bishops, and both have reddish Psi, but it's not really the same shade of red. Vaughn's color has a warm, slightly orange tint, while Odette's is deeper and cooler.
So bishops are generally red.
Rooks are more of an orange, but you and Caleb also have different shades of orange.
Queens?
Odette asked me that too during our last session. It took a little while to figure out how to look inward. My Psi is... colorless? At least I think it's supposed to be. Sometimes it has a faint tint to it, but it varies. I think that's when I'm mimicking someone.
Interesting. As your brain processes the sensory input from Psi receptors, it seems to form imagery based on your knowledge of color and the manifestation of Esper abilities. Queen ranks, being able to mimic others, possess colorless Psi. There is a surprising logic to such a whimsical interpretation of Psi energy.
Hello.
And what about king ranks? What color are they? It is customary to knock before entering an occupied room, particularly when a private medical exam is in progress, Magnus Ulrich. But it seemed like you were having an interesting conversation. I wanted to listen in. I think the medical staff witnessed me drag you out of my infirmary by that ridiculous braid. That is also likely to spur some interesting conversations. Shall we give it a test? How dare you call my braid ridiculous? Envy is truly an ugly emotion, you.
Dang.
I would have thought you got over your jealousy of me years ago, but it seems to persist despite my best efforts to make you feel more confident. Ah, is that why you insist on spending your days acting like an imbecile? This is what happens when you lose your ability to believe in people. You just assume the worst.
He wrapped his arms around the doctor's much smaller frame and rested his head on the top of Dr. Sasuke. That mental image is great.
To think our poor little you has become such a cynic.
The doctor, to my surprise, didn't even bother to shove Magnus away. The look on his face was not at all encouraging, though. I take it you guys have known each other for a long time as well. I was trying my best to hold back a laugh, only half afraid Dr. Sasuke was going to throttle him.
And you didn't answer my question, Morgan.
Dr. Sasuke finally slipped out of his grasp, shooting him a glare. It's Violet. Now, please stop arguing. As interesting as it might be to watch you actually get dragged out by your braid, I don't want to be a witness to an assault. I swear the two of you do nothing but bicker when you interact.
We would fight far less if this fool didn't insist on doing things he knows will irritate me. Such as enter private exam rooms while occupied. I'm allowed to go where I wish, you know. I am in charge of this place, and you have a notoriously short fuse. You're hardly the one in charge of this organization. An irritating figurehead at best,
Damn, went for the jugular with that one.
That almost hurts my feelings. Except you know it's true. In addition, I believe I banned you from the medical wing.
Oh my god, can you please stop? Was there a reason you came by, Magnus? I swear you're just as bad as Caleb when it comes to antagonizing people.
I did not come to this infirmary to be insulted. Did you come here just to irritate us? I'll have you know I came with a very important message from Morgan, if you're finished with her.
A message? One he opted to deliver himself? What message would that be?
I don't know if I should tell you with you in the room. It's private, after all.
Can you stop trying to provoke him for the 1 minute it will take you to relay the message you have for me? I can't imagine it's that private. I haven't even been here long enough to warrant private messages from anywhere.
You are no fun at all, I swear. But if you insist... The Council has declined the 5 requests to have your system access reinstated, and the request for a face-to-face meeting.
Wow, such shock. Dr. Sosky gave me an amused look.
You requested a face-to-face meeting with Endgame's council?
Maybe. They weren't responding to my other requests. I thought maybe if I made a case for restoring system access in person. I just want to contact my family. I don't think it's that dramatic a request.
I see. So they are continuing the communication blackout then? I'm afraid so.
But why?
Idiotic bureaucracy, no doubt. Officially, they're still concerned about the location of your family leaking if communications are opened.
No one is as concerned for their safety as me, but your council has to realize they can't just isolate me like this and expect me to accept it.
I'm curious, Magnus. What is the unofficial reason our council is hesitating to give Morgan basic permissions back? Well now, that would be telling, wouldn't it? It can't be that they're hoping isolation will make her more compliant, can it? That would be, by my observation, quite the miscalculation. It would be, wouldn't it? Especially if you elected not to warn them of such.
Interesting. Interesting. Got some politicking going around.
Doesn't it seem more interesting to let them make such an obvious mistake?
They're doing... what?
I'm certain our council is beside themselves regarding what to do with a new member who doesn't bend as easily to their will as most new recruits.
I haven't done a thing that can be considered non-compliant unless you count the part where I was in a delirium.
I do think they're counting that, yes. You have deferred to Dr. Sosky instead of complying with their wishes to begin training. And you questioned their decision about communications. Repeatedly. I suppose they believed with you coming out of New Albion's strict meritocracy, you'd be more cooperative.
The meritocracy is strict, and they encourage us to toe the line under threat of obliterating our future, but it doesn't turn us into automatons. And if you're the one in charge, surely you can do something about this. Or was Dr. Sosky right when he called you a figurehead? I expected one of his usual remarks back, but instead there was an awkward pause.
The ones in charge are the council. I sit on the council as a formality. But I am, shall we say, outnumbered.
Ah, so you're the Anakin Skywalker. Gotcha. If that's true, why did you take sole responsibility for the abduction thing before?
In the end, I mete out their orders and make sure they're followed. Unfortunately, until the Moirai give the all-clear, I'm afraid the Council is unlikely to budge on the matter of communications. And the Moirai aren't focused on your family's safety alone.
Then I hope the Council enjoys my messages, because they're going to keep getting them.
They may take away what messaging privileges you have if you continue to abuse them.
Yeah, our girl's resourceful. She'll find a different way. I gritted my teeth, biting back the responses that came to mind when he said that. Sending messages with the actual message system was not an abuse. It's what it was for. I'll keep it in mind. But if there's one thing New Albion's meritocracy taught me, it's the power of gentle persistence. I won't let this go just because they're being stubborn. And if that strategy doesn't work, I'll try another one. I won't sit back and wait for them to decide to reward me with a basic system function. I'll find a way to make them listen. If the Council is determined to manipulate me into submission and punish me for insubordination when I don't comply without question, then all I can say is that Endgame is far more disappointing an organization than I expected it to be. Damn. Girl spitting truth bombs left, right, and center. I hadn't meant all that to just spill out, especially given that I was talking to the highest ranked agent, someone who sat on that council. But this wasn't right. Instead of looking angry or insulted, Magnus just seemed thoughtful.
I'm sure they'll come around. Somehow. So did you come intending to ruin everyone's day? Or was that merely an added benefit of your visit to the infirmary today? Consider it a bonus. I also thought Morgan might like company on her way back to her apartment.
If I'm clear to go. Dr. Sosky looked like he was debating saying something else, but he finally nodded.
You're free to go. I will see you again the day after tomorrow.
Thank you. As I followed Magnus into the hall, he leaned down to me.
I expected at least one parting shot, to be honest. I'm a little disappointed.
Dr. Sosky's stylus struck the back of his head about a half-second later. Amazing. Magnus kept smiling as if nothing happened, stooping to pick it up.
I've been wanting to add another one to my collection.
It disturbs me you have an actual collection of them.
Only because you is so amusing to provoke.
If you keep it up, I have a feeling we're going to need to start running.
That seems like fun.
But Dr. Sosky did not give chase, and we made it to the main hall without further incident.
Rather than just returning to your room, how about a tour of the facility? I was surprised the others hadn't done at least that much for you. Keeping you cooped up in your quarters or the training room is a bit much, don't you think?
Well, I was trying to avoid interacting with other Espers. The whole unintentional mimicking thing. And, you know, brain damage.
Even so, you can't stay locked up forever.
Oh? I wouldn't know that, judging by your current situation, sir.
Remember that most Espers are unranked and not terribly strong. They are infantry only, often low level. Elites are uncommon regardless what your experience so far may have led you to believe.
I suppose that's true. It just seemed wiser to avoid crowded areas.
It's the middle of the workday. If we avoid the training rooms, we're unlikely to encounter a crowd. Avoiding people is my specialty, after all.
Somehow it makes me nervous when you say that.
Come now. You've long since stopped being nervous with me, Morgan.
Well, I suppose that's true. It was difficult to be nervous around him, or take him seriously, given how he acted like a child half the time. Then again, if they continued to keep me locked up and isolated, I might start acting the same way, right? Around how many ranked Espers are there in Endgame anyway?
Precious few. Ranked Espers make up only about 4% of the Esper population. And regardless of what people may believe, Endgame houses a minority of Espers, not the majority of them. Even ranked ones. Before the advent of the F-class, we still struggled to identify and recruit all Espers. Queens are the most adept at hiding from us, but they aren't the only ones who can. Some cities, states, and nations are less than thorough with testing, or don't have strict testing policies at all. Not everyone believes all Espers should be with Endgame in the first place. And many Espers born on the night side are beyond our reach, even if we're aware of them. There are also espers in the Twilight Waste we have no access to. I'm sure there are enclaves of them here on the Dayside as well, quietly living off the grid somewhere. All our estimates as to how many espers exist on Arcalis at any point are based on the N-class. We can't track fairy espers as easily, but we know their population has been growing at a phenomenal rate for the last 20 to 30 years. There are likely hundreds of thousands of unidentified espers on the planet. Most are low-level infantry, barely more adept at Psi than the average citizen, but more and more high-ranked espers exist outside our system. Because they escape notice, fall through the cracks, or because they hide from us, as you did. I suppose that's one reason the Council is wary of you, Morgan. In a way, you symbolize a change happening in our community. A change not everyone is happy about.
Well, maybe if the Council didn't make being an Endgame suck absolute balls, more people would be willing to go and join up. Like if it was voluntary, but instead it's a mandatory recruitment. Of course people are going to fight back against that. And the more people fight against it, the tighter they hold on, which makes people fight more against it. Sheesh. I feel like a lot of these problems would be avoided if the Council had some actual espers on it. Honestly. That's probably why the Council's freaking out. It's like, we're being outnumbered by the espers. We gotta, like, hold on to our elite position here. Terrible. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. If this community is dead set on punishing someone for symbolizing change, then maybe change is necessary. I mean, look, I'm still learning about espers. I spent a lot of time avoiding information about them.
You were that afraid of being discovered?
I was. And anything to do with them made me anxious. Then I ended up dating someone who wanted to study them, so I learned a little.
Trent Erickson, I believe.
I gave him a sharp look.
Your connection to him came out when we looked into your history.
Yes, it was Trent.
Did he find out you were an Esper?
It would be hard to live with someone and not find it out, but he assumed I was just infantry as well.
So he helped you hide it. What a faithful lover.
Well, I don't know that he was that faithful.
I guess going a year with no contact does shed some doubt on that.
I suppose it does. He seemed almost surprised by that response. A slight frown crossed his face, and I wondered if he thought I'd get angry he brought it up. The conversation had taken a serious turn I hadn't expected, especially when dealing with Magnus. He had moments of uncharacteristic seriousness that made me wonder how much of his usual personality was a mask. It was almost like he tried to throw people off by behaving the way he did. But when we were alone, sometimes the mask faded and he was a very different man. I wasn't sure what to make of that. If anything, I'm learning that king ranks have a very difficult life. Judging by Kesa and Magnus, they seem to just be, like, overly protected, can't show their true feelings or thoughts or anything, and have to kind of put on this mask all the time. Their masks are both very different, but it's interesting that they have those similarities. So, where are you taking me? A smile flitted over his features when I changed the subject.
I think you'll like it.
Are you taking me to the library? Ooh, the greenhouse. Also a good choice. I guess it's not a greenhouse. That was in the mansion. But this is... Is this also considered a green... I mean, it is glass. Maybe it is a greenhouse. I don't know. And he was right. When we entered the garden, I stood for a long moment just breathing in the wet scent of earth and plants, letting the humidity cling to my skin. It's beautiful. Magnus took my arm, leading me down a footpath and deeper into the garden.
Many of our agents come here for walks, late at night or otherwise.
I never expected to find a place like this here.
As your father was a botanist, I'm sure you visited many places like this before.
Magnus, I know you looked up every possible bit of information about me, but it's a little annoying for you to constantly bring it up as if you know me very well. You don't. A list of facts about me doesn't mean you know everything. And sometimes it would be nice to share something on my own rather than have you make an assumption about it. Yes, my father was a botanist, but maybe I would have shared that if you hadn't.
I apologize.
Besides, you know so many things about me and I know almost nothing about you. It feels like you're rubbing it in my face. All the time.
Well, perhaps a little. I suppose it's a nasty habit. But I find you interesting, and there's very little about me that will interest you.
I think it would interest me to know who you are when you're not the eccentric head of the Endgame forces who tries to annoy everyone.
I don't try to annoy everyone, just the particularly fun ones.
Is there anyone you don't find it fun to annoy?
I'm learning it's less fun to annoy you than it is to not annoy you.
Thank you. I think. We walked in silence for a bit, and I wondered if everyone would panic if I came here alone sometime. Usually I had an escort wherever I went. I was certain there were still residual concerns about me trying to escape. Though I hadn't tried doing that whole teleporting thing with intent at any point, I knew the fact I'd done it unconsciously had caused problems. Apparently, one brief escape into the city while half-conscious was one time too many. Odette told me they were lucky Ari found me as quickly as he did. But that had been when I was sick. Now that I was getting better... I like that she's having all these thoughts and Magnus's face is just changing expressions as she's thinking. You can't hear her thoughts, right, Magnus? I wondered if they were afraid I'd do it again, and maybe not be found as easily this time.
What are you thinking about, Morgan?
I started at the sound of his voice so close to my ear, glaring at him when he laughed. He definitely did that on purpose. I was thinking about escaping.
Oh? That sounds interesting. Do elaborate.
More specifically, I was wondering how much of a concern it is that I might try.
Well, I won't say it's not a concern at all. But I think everyone is counting on your not wanting to spend your life dodging our attempts to catch up with you. Because I'm sure you realize that is what would happen. And of course, we have places to contain people who do not otherwise wish to be contained.
I figured as much. In any case, I'm under strict orders not to use my Psi until I'm recovered. Forget about prisons. The idea of getting lectured by Dr. Sasaki is enough to keep me from trying.
I'm sure he'd be pleased to learn he is a sufficient deterrent.
No doubt. Magnus took me to a few other places than just the garden. The lobby, just to show it to me. Yeah, the archive, here we go. The archive, which I was very excited to see. It was as amazing and beautiful and vast as I imagined. Enough I could even ignore him laughing at my reaction to it. We stopped by the lounge Odette had mentioned to me a few times, but we didn't stay long because there were many people, and we were getting a distressing amount of attention. What? It's just the king and queen walking amongst the common folk. No biggie. No one approached us, but they were staring. A lot. Magnus, I was certain everyone knew, which meant they could guess who I was. He returned me to my room after that. Well, thanks for the tour.
I'm afraid I'll have to leave you here. I've been out of my office long enough to cause a fuss, I'm sure. You know, this is when I'm supposed to encourage you to try your hardest.
Why don't you, then?
It's much more interesting to watch and see what you choose to do.
I'm glad you find me entertaining.
I said interesting, not entertaining. Well, a little entertaining.
Lovely.
I'll see you later, Morgan. Thank you for the conversation today. It was enjoyable.
Thank you for the tour. I also had fun. He left me, and yet again, I had the strange feeling he was a very different person than he usually presented himself to be. And now, with him gone, my mind immediately went back to the situation with my system access. I was still frustrated about the refusal to reinstate it. It didn't seem like Magnus agreed with it either. I hadn't expected him to be so limited with what he could and couldn't do. It made sense that a monolith like Endgame wasn't overseen by just one person, though. That was just never the impression I'd got from the little I'd seen of them through the years. I fell on the sofa, staring up at the ceiling. Maybe I should just be more patient. When I stopped to think about it, I'd only been released from the infirmary a few days ago. After spending 8 days in varying states of unintentional destruction mode, and a few more being prodded nonstop by the medical team, 2 weeks wasn't a long time. I could give the request a break for a few more days, maybe 1 more week, and then I could start really throwing a fit. I didn't want them to think they'd won. But a respite or respite might show I was willing to play nice. It would be an olive branch of sorts. And then, well, we'd have to see. That's what I thought. I was surprised to wake up to a message notification on the console in my room the next day. From Magnus, of all people. I hadn't even thought it could get messages from individuals, just departments like administration or medical. Well, he is a king, he can influence technology, so... But it had been a request to come to his office at my convenience. It included a map, which I appreciated since I had no other way to look up how to get there. Unfortunately, my convenience meant after the morning training session with Odette in the usual reserved and otherwise empty training room. No outside early morning jogs yet. It was a little before lunch when we finished the usual regimen of meditation, yoga, jogging, and new today, learning how to fall. Why do we fall? Which was comical and boring at once. I love that white turtleneck on her. Looks so good. I returned to my place for a shower before heading to Magnus's office. I couldn't notify him, though, since I had no way to contact him back. His office was in an unfamiliar area, but it looked much like everything else. I wasn't sure I was at the right place since there wasn't a visible nameplate, but I heard the voices before I knocked. One was Magnus, though he sounded odd. The other was a woman I didn't recognize. Is it Mum? Magnus's mum? They were muffled beyond further recognition. I couldn't make out what they were saying. But the words were heated, quick, staccato. They seemed to be arguing. Unsure if I should wait or knock, I just stood in front of the door for a moment. He was the one who asked me to come down, but I would be interrupting. To be fair, it's not like he scheduled me in for a specific time. That implied I could come whenever. Okay, we don't have the cautious trait. If it is his mom he's arguing with, I don't think he would mind the interruption, honestly. He might be kind of relieved. I finally knocked with some hesitation. In the worst case, he'd just tell me to wait or come back later. The voices inside stopped. There was a long moment of silence. Oh, hello. Yep, he's having a heated conversation. I didn't expect the door to open seconds later and Magnus to be right there. He glowered down at me, a dark and unfamiliar expression on his face, mouth open as if he'd been about to say something. As soon as our eyes met, the expression melted into surprise, followed by confusion. Sorry to interrupt. You said you wanted me to come down. This is the first chance I've had all day, but if I need to come back... Sudden realization flashed on his face and he smiled. No, of course, come in. Are you sure? If you're in the middle... Please, come in. Please, come in. He took my elbow and pulled me into his office. It is his mother. Knew it. My gaze went straight to the other person there, an older woman with gray threaded blonde hair. Her expression was one of frank curiosity, and, oddly, recognition, as if she knew who I was. Yeah, I feel like she was one of the arguing parties when you were unconscious the other day. I'm afraid we'll have to end our talk here. I forgot I had a prior engagement. You should have mentioned Miss Leone would be coming. I've been looking forward to meeting her. Silly me. You know how my memory is these days. She ignored Magnus as she came towards me with a pleasant smile on her face, one hand extended. I'm Cherise Ulrich. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Magnus had released me and was headed to his desk, but he cast a look over his shoulder at me, an oddly smug grin playing on his lips.
She's on the council.
Ah. The council? The council? The one refusing to talk to me? Also, Ulrich? Looking between them, it felt like there was an obvious resemblance, but it was like a wall of ice between them. I didn't get a sense of a familial relationship at all. I'm Magnus's mother, as you may have guessed. A flicker of something passed over Magnus's face. Annoyance? Anger? Disgust? I snapped my eyes back to Charisse, unsure what to say or how to react. I wasn't expecting to meet you today. I suppose I owe my son thanks for this surprise. Well, I have been trying to set up a meeting. Ah, yes, I heard about that. Quite refreshing for someone to unapologetically reach out to the council. It's unfortunate the ranking member has elected to decline, though some of us very much wanted to accept. I apologize for the difficult time you've had since your arrival. Is the... how did you put that exactly? The ranking member? Is the ranking member the one that wants to scramble my brains from that argument?
A pity it's the council who's largely responsible for that difficult time.
We are responsible for everything that happens here, and we make many difficult decisions under the guidance of the Moirai. Some, even we, are not entirely happy about.
If you'll excuse us. Mother, I had something important to discuss with Morgan.
Of course. I wouldn't want to delay the conversation. I would very much like to meet with you again soon, Morgan. I'm curious about the impressions a newcomer like yourself has of our organization. In the meantime, I'll leave you two to talk. She cast a look Magnus's way, smiling faintly. I'll be watching your progress with great interest, Morgan. Okay, see you later, Palpatine. She excused herself and left. The tension in the air lingered half a moment, then evaporated when the door clicked shut behind her.
Come in. Have a seat if you like.
Is everything alright?
Everything's fine.
I wasn't sure I believed it, but it wasn't the point I would choose to argue. Instead, I looked around the office, almost surprised his desk was tidy instead of the chaotic mess I'd expected. Except a few things that looked like they'd fallen. Before I sat, I stooped to pick up a few of the items, one colorful paper square catching my eye. It looked like a reminder for something. There were a few more of them scattered around, notes scrawled in messy pen. No, you have sticky notes? No! Aw, man. I love this man. He's got sticky notes. That's rather old-fashioned, isn't it?
I find they work better if I can see them. I don't like constant notifications going off in my head. And as I mentioned, my nanosystem is much more sparse than most people anyway. How is your day going?
The same as always. You know, I was wondering about something your mother said earlier. This is the third or fourth time someone has mentioned the Moirai. Is it okay to ask who and what they are?
Ah, that. The Moirai are a group of bishops that, among other things, monitor, for lack of better words, the flow of time. They look ahead for potential events that may need our intervention. Like a rogue queen that might inadvertently end up in the hands of unsavory people who want, in fact, to do unsavory things to her.
They saw what might happen to me if Endgame didn't intervene?
They did, and the Council takes what they say very much to heart. In your case, it was the Moirai who encouraged such a dramatic approach. There were concerns about some of the possible futures that lay ahead.
Some of them.
The future is, from what I understand, difficult. The more adept you are, the more possibilities you see. It means you can approach problems with greater precision sometimes, but while avoiding one future, you may stumble into another one that's even worse if you aren't careful.
Sounds complicated.
Well, I'm sure it is.
What else do they do, if you don't mind my asking? You said looking into the future was just one responsibility.
Perhaps another time. I did call you here for a specific reason.
Right! Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us.
You have permission to sidetrack me all you want, Morgan. However, I fear we may be interrupted, so I'd like to be sure I have time to give you... this.
He looked around his desk, frowning slightly. He turned to check the shelf behind him, then the desk drawer. Oh boy.
Aha! Here.
He pulled out a handheld display and held it out to me. I took it from him, curious. What is this?
A message from your mother.
What? Did they lift the no contact order?
They did not. I contacted your family myself, and without the Council's knowledge.
Dang, you bad boy. You went against their orders? But why?
As you well know, I am a strictly rule-abiding leader, and normally I would never do something so clearly opposed to our ruling body. But Sasuke believed it would be beneficial, and he is, of course, an exceptional doctor despite his awful personality. So I felt obligated to agree in order to help our dearest new member.
Right. You're very rule-abiding. That's why you were always so diligent about wearing your inhibitor around me. Will I be able to reply? I don't have access to my messaging system.
For the time being, I'm afraid all communication will have to go through me.
Okay, but at least there's some communication, and you can actually read your mom's words for yourself, so that's good.
As I said, the Council is unaware of this minor deviation. I can send messages back and forth without being detected. It will be difficult for me to do so without being aware of the contents.
Well, at least he gave her a heads up, like, I'm gonna read the mail, so just so you know, just so you're aware.
So if you're going to tell your mother how handsome I am, just be aware I'll see it.
Ah, and also humble. I think I can resist the temptation, no worries.
Now, no need to resist. It's very well known that I'm an attractive man. I'm sure you'll just be reinforcing what she already knows.
Nevertheless, I think I'll refrain.
How sad to see someone so young unable to embrace her heart.
Anyway... He chuckled to himself, seeming more amused I flat rejected his attempts to tease than he would have been if he'd annoyed me. I hadn't known him long, but I was already getting used to this kind of thing from him. I smirked slightly. I mean, don't get me wrong, you are handsome, just not enough to write home about. Shock.
Oh dear. I'm afraid that by the time you write your response, I may well have forgotten I allowed it. Wouldn't that be a shame?
Don't worry, I can write you a reminder. If I put it right on the center of your forehead, you're bound to remember it.
That could work. Though I found the sticky portions of the notes don't adhere well to my forehead.
You've tried that before?
Odette did it, while Mara held me down. I strongly feel it was insubordination. I even filed an official complaint.
How'd that work out for you?
It was dismissed.
What a surprise.
Whenever you have a response for your family, let me know, Morgan. Assuming I remember, I'll send it along.
Thank you for this, Magnus.
Well, it was Yu's idea, as I said.
But you had to listen to him, and do something about it. So thank you. Magnus paused, tipping his head to the side before letting out a soft sigh.
It seems I'm needed elsewhere. I'm afraid we'll have to cut our meeting short.
I understand. I thanked him again and left, pausing at the door to glance back at him as he leaned over his desk and scrawled something on one of his colorful notes, only to stick it to the wall beside the desk. I feel that. When I was finally alone again, the first thing I did was put water on for tea. Then I settled into the chair and started reading the message from Mum. It was lengthy and relieved, but it started with a rant. Angry, worried, and loving. And so like her. I smiled even as tears stung my eyes. She insisted they were all fine. Daniel was continuing his studies and adapting to a new system. Aphra did things different than New Albion. In some ways, he liked it. Wayne was having to lie low for a while, but was already looking forward to going back to work with the safety department. Brian's fiancé had moved with him. It was very romantic and emotional, Mum said. She and Dad were fine. Dad had work lined up already. She was taking a break for a while. Her name and art were too well known for her to just set up in a new place. But she'd been needing a holiday, she insisted. They were all worried about me. Oliver called almost every day from Sierra to see if they had news. They wanted to know about my situation, how I was, what happened. She never asked me why I hadn't told them. All she said was that I should never have tried to deal with it alone. Mom, I love you. I was happy. And sad. And curled myself around a sofa pillow, sobbing into it for a long time in sheer relief. It was as if every anxiety and pressure I'd been holding inside released at once. By the time I was calm enough to even think about a response, it was nearly time for dinner. And the water for my tea was cold again. I put a new pot on and decided that maybe, for the first time, I'd have dinner in the lounge and write a response there. And I reminded myself I really needed to find a way to repay Magnus for this. I owed him one.